So I'll let you start, Britt.
Okay. So we are back. This is part 3, right?
Yes. Yep.
Part 3 of our grief series. If you missed the first part, we just kind of talked about grief, how it impacts relationships. Second part, we talked about grieving people who are still alive. And for this episode, we are going to talk about something that I feel like hits everybody at some point in life. Just having to grieve expectations and grieve life when things don't play out the way that we wanted them to, the way we planned them to, the way we hoped that they would. And I think for a lot of people that is very hard to bounce back from sometimes, depending upon what didn't work out, what didn't go the way that you hoped it would go. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk about this because it's a touchy subject, but I feel like it needs to be talked about because it's something that everybody experiences. And we have a guest here today to help us discuss this topic. And Shawana, I will let you introduce Mike.
So I will introduce him with one of his famous intro lines. The greatest single dad, world father. How do you say it, Mike? I don't want to misquote.
I am the reigning, defending,
world's
greatest single father. Reigning, defending. You know, new people come in, so I just gotta let you know I'm defending it always.
So he loves the dads. He's like head of the single dad committee. So he calls himself, the greatest that there is. But Mike is one of the most like transparent guys I think I've ever met. And I think that's how our connection has been able to last as long as it has, because I think despite us being young and growing and different things happening in life, one thing we've always been with each other is very authentic and like honest and showing up as ourselves. So I'm actually extremely excited to have him up here. Y'all check out The Safe Spot. That's a really, really dope podcast that he has. Like his son was up there not too long ago. And they have those conversations that I feel like men don't necessarily have as often as they should. So when you get a chance, definitely plug in with him. We're, like Brittany said, we're excited to have him on and talk about grieving expectations. I want to start off by just saying, well, Mike, do you have anything you want to give the people real quick before I jump in?
I'm done. Let's jump into it.
Okay, so I want to just kind of talk about some of the standards that I feel like from birth, like what they show us on TV, what we're taught in school, like expectations that society puts on us. So of course, like finding the one, getting married, the person that you marry is the person that you have your kids with. And if you have multiple, it's kind of under the same home. Even with school, like we got that expectation. Okay, you graduate high school. If you don't go to college, you go to trade school, you get a job, you figure out how to be successful working for someone. Again, you find a family. It's kind of like this American dream per se. Like from the get-go, we're trained to see that if it doesn't look like this, that something's wrong. And that doesn't always mean that. So as millennials, of course, I feel like we're in a place of trying to like reconstruct what our norms are and reconstruct like what's successful, what we can like look up to, and kind of take those old traditions and stresses off of ourselves. So with that being said, I kind of wanted you to give your own experience about maybe your own concept of what the American dream was for you and how you've had to like grieve certain expectations so that you could be your full self.
I think initially, like, I learned that process as far as like not having the American experience and grieving it at a very young age, right? Because you look on TV or even when you go to high school and, if you grow up in a certain area around a certain dynamic and you have something, you think, I'm fine. I'm doing what everybody else is doing. And then you start to get in other circles and you kind of see like, well, wait, like these people got more shoes than I do, or they have more clothes than I do, or they have more money or opportunities. They're able to go do certain things. They're going on vacation like twice a year. Like, so I started to see at a young age that, well, wait, you know what I mean? Like my situation is not like theirs. And it caused I don't even want to, I guess I should use the word jealousy, right? Because I was like grieving what I didn't have, even though I didn't have it, So it started at a very young age, just being like, man, like life is really different outside of where I am. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it started from a young age, and then over time it just consistently starts to. I think once your eyes are open to there's more going on outside of your world, and the things that you're not getting or that you want that you're not receiving, right? You kind of like now start to look for that, and seeing these differences. And I think the grieving process really started there.
I was going to ask, you kind of segued for me. So how did that affect you mentally with how you saw people? It's like, how did that affect your connections? Because I feel like that alone kind of manifested into your situation you had, you know, and a big expectation you had to grieve as far as like your personal life. So what do you think, seeing that and realizing like, hey, I'm not measuring up to what it's supposed to look like, and how you started viewing yourself, how did that like affect you mentally, and how did that kind of lead into your personal situation?
Good and bad. I think initially it pushed for me to have this drive of attaining that, right? Because I didn't have it. So at that point it was, well, life won't be right until I get these things, until I get these opportunities, until I meet the one, and I'm wearing all the different shoes and the clothes and, you know, all these different things. How it evolved in with my personal situation, you know, I ended up becoming a father, like at 18 years old. And in that you think, oh, well, we're going to get married and we're going to build this family and we're going to have a place together and there's going to be the white picket fence and the dog and, you know, all of that type of stuff. And then by 19, I had sole custody and I was the only parent in that situation, right? Like not only was I the only parent, but my side of the family was the only family. You know what I mean? So it was like the entire dynamic of how, you know, I grew up with both parents and there was two sides to the family, you know, and seeing on TV, that's how stuff worked. You know, you see the Cosby Show and Living World, you know, so it's always the Black family and that was the expectation. And now I got my kid and it's just us. And that was rough. You know what I mean? Because it's like, I even as a father, you know, breaking it down to just me solely, it was so much that a child requires that I didn't know how to do from like a parent perspective. I wasn't born with any maternal instincts, right? So it's like this whole motherly dynamic now is changed because you always said like, well, it's the mom and she has the kids, so she had to be mom and dad, right? But I don't really think anybody ever talks about where it's like you got to be dad and mom. Like that's oh my God, I didn't, you know what I mean? I didn't know how to change a diaper when he came into the world. So that was extremely rough. And just knowing that this person that I had this child with had no intention of being there at all. The not only just the grieving of that, of what I felt like I lost, now having to come to the understanding of, well, now I have to create this entire dynamic for this child so they don't feel like they're missing out on anything, while at the same time having no idea what I was doing. Right? So it was a lot.
I have a question.
Shoot.
So I know you said by 19 you had sole custody. What was it like when you realized, okay, this is where this is headed? So obviously going up to custody, you know, there were different things happening that you were like, okay, this is not going where I thought it would go. What, like, how were you just like mentally when you first started seeing signs like, okay, this really just got to be on me and that's it?
I'm going to give you the nitty gritty. Like Shawana said, I always believe in transparency. And I just always want to tell people how stuff happened, right? We were not currently in a relationship when we found out my son was on the way.
Okay.
So I had already recognized red flags and had removed myself from the situation, right?
Gotcha.
So now, because of my responsibilities to my son, I'm now being pulled back. I initially knew that I would be a single parent when we found out that Brandon was on the way. I knew from jump street and the go that at the end of the day, I'm going to be the only person that was responsible for this child, right? So I was, as far as like leading up to the custody portion, it was really thrust on me. It was kind of like he came into the world and then it was like, well, here you go. Peace, dude.
Wow.
And it was a lot. It took over. Yeah, he was born, but when I was 18, I had sole custody when I was 19. I think in between that time period, we went through about maybe 35 different court dates, right? And the majority of them would just be between me and the court. So it was a large grieving process because one, I felt like, not that I have any regrets because I don't, but I felt like I had a game plan for life.
Yeah.
Before all of this happened, right? And I saw myself doing things and going to places and going to college and having the college experience and da 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 da. And then at 18, all of that went away, right?
Yeah.
So I lost relationships, friendships, people that I associated with for years. Like everybody moved on, and I felt like I was just left here, you know? And you have to mask all that, right? Because you don't have time to cry over what's dead, because now I'm responsible for my son.
You're focused elsewhere.
Exactly. So I just had to annex all of them feelings, emotions, and it was traumatic. You know, like what I'm finding out now, like going through therapy, my therapist is like, well, that was a traumatic experience. I didn't realize that at the time, but
you didn't have time to even feel it.
Had to move. His Brandon's birthday is 2 days after mine. So literally, I turned 18. 2 days later, my son was born.
That's crazy.
And the whole world changed in like a span of 48 hours. You know, and then a month later, he was living with me full time. So I didn't have time to even really process. It was just, okay, well, that's done. Now we got to move here. If that answers your question, I know I went on a bit of.
No, that was perfect. That was wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, it was, and I don't regret it, but I think as I'm getting older, it just really hits me how fast that process happened.
Mm-hmm.
How much I didn't really deal with it or address things. I just kind of buried it. What's the word? Compartmentalized.
Yeah.
Just compartmentalized the entire thing and just moved on. But it was very rough. Because I felt like I wasn't good enough, right? Like I wasn't good enough to have this relationship. I wasn't good enough for her to want to stay and raise this kid. And now it's like I'm a father and I feel like I'm not good enough, because now it went from the grief of losing all of that, right? To now having this kid, and not only is this kid codependent on me, but I'm 19, so I'm still codependent on my people, you know? So it's like I feel like I'm not even good enough now to really call myself your dad, because everything that I feel like I'm providing you is really coming from somebody else, you know, which was my support system, which I was thankful to have. But even still, it put me back into that initial mindset of when I was younger, like seeing all those things I didn't have. Now I'm seeing all these things that are being given to my son that I can't give. Right? So it pushed me even further, being like, hey, I have to come up with this lifestyle now. Like I have to, because if I don't make it, then how is he going to make it?
Wow. And I'm just glad that we can have this conversation, because you would never know that those are the thoughts what a man is thinking in these scenarios.
No.
We don't have access to this type of like insight. So to know I know Black men deal with so much anyway, because y'all are also conditioned and taught from the beginning to like, you don't show emotion. Like you are the person who holds it together. Like you're the head. So it's almost like, what feelings? What, like, no, we got to grind. We got to do this. We got to do that. So knowing that y'all are having to combat the emotions of just regular human experience on top of the expectations of a man, the expectations of you as a father, the expectations of you as a son and as a citizen in this world. It's just like, but you still got to show up. And that, I don't know, that kind of just put me in a different perspective of like what y'all deal with. And not that I didn't appreciate Black men at all, but like even more of a reverence, like, wow, like y'all really going through just as much as we are, probably, you know, the ones that decide to show up, because, you know, everybody, man or woman, like in your situation,
right?
In different situations, like they just decide, well, I'm not going to show up because I don't have it in me. But for those who are trying to, I know how hard that is. So I commend you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I commend you as well. And I think what stuck out for me about your story is, you know, a lot of people say men become fathers once they see the baby, because women, you experience pregnancy and you've had this bond. So I think the fact of you even highlighting you didn't have that maternal instinct. So you were literally like, I have to figure this out. I don't know about, you know, raising kids. Not that anybody knows how to raise kids, so there's no guide like handbook to it. But I think a lot of times, you know, the focus should be on the baby and the mom healing and stuff. But I do feel like men are left out when the topic of fatherhood comes out, and how huge of a transition that is for men, because you're right. A lot of men don't have that maternal instinct. They don't always have that, okay, I have this new baby and I know exactly what to do. So I think the fact that you even highlighted that is important, because we don't get to hear that, you know, perspective. We always get to hear how the transition is for the mom, how the mom's doing, how the baby's adjusting. But it's like very rarely do you hear somebody be like, oh, well, how's dad? How he, how's he transitioning? So I think it's important for you to continue to tell your story, because I do feel like men are left out of the equation, how they're feeling, how they're adjusting. Nobody asks about them. They always ask about the baby and the mom. So yeah. Wow.
Exactly.
Wow.
I wish sometimes I had wrote a book on it, because I really felt like when it happened.
You still can.
But I mean, like, I felt like when it happened to me, it hadn't happened to anybody.
Yeah.
So there was nobody to talk to, like, as far as from a male perspective, like, what do I do? You know what I mean? Like, I have this kid. When Brandon was born, I didn't have a car at the time. So literally, Brandon was born, I got custody, and we were in the house together for like a 4 year straight. Right, because I wanted to get to a certain age before I put him in daycare. So, you know, my mom still had to work, my dad still had to work, and it was just me and this baby, like, every day. And it would blow my mind, because, like, I would look at him and be like, I really got a kid, like a whole person. You know what I mean? And the
scary.
like, you see what I'm saying? Like, I had to change diapers, I had to make milk. Then you got to figure out the ratio of the cereal to the milk when it go, you know, because if not, it was just so much. I had to stop eating his Chiquita bananas that came in the little glass jar, because they was bomb, and I knew he loved them, but it was my favorite snack. It was so much to figure out. And I thank God for the process, right? Because I feel like it made me and him so much closer, right?
Yeah.
But it's a fear, man, and it's not something that really anybody really discusses. There's a lot of single fathers out here that are going through what I'm going through, or that have been through what I've been through, and nobody talks about us. It's like we're like an unknown community.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Ooh, I wanted to. I said I'm not gonna go any deeper, but I do have a close friend that's kind of experiencing that same thing. Like, even to the part, like, when you have to go to the doctors, like, even with him showing up, it's like he's not there. They just straight communicate with the mom. He don't know the terminology. Is he on the phone trying to Google what the fuck are y'all talking about? Like, and then, like, if he too is grieving the expectation of what a family dynamic was, this is different. So mom may not be communicating to him either for whatever reason. So it's like he really just out here trying to show up and trying to figure it out at the same time. So I just hats off to you guys.
I think what we have to realize as men, and what I had to come to, because so here's the crazy thing. Here's the crazy thing. And I can relate to your friend with not having a family dynamic. Even though I had my son, and my son was actively living with me, the word on the street, it was that I had, like, taken my son, right? I had taken him, and she couldn't be involved, and I was still like a bad father. And what we have to realize as men, like, you have to cut the thought process out that I'm trying to please her, right? That showing up has something to do with other people and their family, and how they're going to view me, and what my perception is. That's what really weighs down on a man when you are not in a family dynamic, right? Because it's like, it feels like no matter what I do, somebody is still looking at me like I'm not showing up, right? So I have to prove myself to everybody else, including the kid, right? Because the perception of Black men is that when we have a kid, the question is always there on whether you're going to be there or not. It's never to the mom. Nobody ever asked that woman if she is going to get up and walk away from that kid. She has the same opportunity to do so did I do? I didn't find that out
And
until I was in the situation.
them do it. Plenty
when nobody talks about
it.
it.
I know they don't.
And I'm gonna throw this out here, and I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, right? I'm not saying it. But if a woman walks away, like when she walked away from our situation, the immediate thought process was, well, what help can we give her? What mental situation is she going through? What has the stress done to her, right? But if that happens to a guy, he's immediately a deadbeat.
Yeah.
Immediately, right? We never ask those questions like, well, what? And I'm not saying his actions are right, but we never try to look beneath the surface and see like, well, what is causing him to just be like out of the picture? And I'm not saying it's right, but I'm just saying I just feel like the same grace that is given to women that do this is not afforded to Black men. Like the question is already there when she gets pregnant. You gonna be there?
Yeah.
You gonna take care of your kids? Like, why you gotta ask you that? You know?
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's another society standard on how men are supposed to show up too.
Yeah.
Y'all aren't allowed to feel in those ways, like because you're men. So, so thank you. I was gonna say thank you for sharing that experience. I think on a personal level, I too grieve the dynamic of what family is like, and not just an intimate connection. Like even with my own family, because my parent connection isn't the healthiest on both sides. So my whole idea of what a big happy family is supposed to be, whether I'm with somebody or not, I think I have had to like just kind of grieve that expectation that we're not gonna gather once someone on every Sunday and have this big dinner and everybody's gonna talk about, have kumbaya circle and just, dance, have music, whatever. Like my family, as many families are surviving through trauma, or trying to just pick up the pieces from like childhood and stuff like that, and it makes it harder to harmonize when everybody's out here offended about something or harboring stuff from their childhood, or you can't. It's just very me, and my trauma. This is my whatever. So I know for me, I actively grieve that, and also with my child's father, because even my expectation of how co-parenting would be, because I watched my mom and dad co-parent lovely, even with them having addiction, they never let that or their feelings towards each other come between us. Like to this day, even coming up next week, Thanksgiving, both of my parents will be here, and they both are dating other people. So it's like they always tried to do, even if they couldn't, what was best for us. So my expectation of that as a co-parent was completely fucking crushed. And it hurt me. Like it really hurt me. I want to say I grieved that harder than I did my divorce. No lie. Because I'm like, but even though we not in love, I still love you. How come we can't just, what I'm saying? Why? What's the animosity? I don't understand.
Yeah.
So, and it made me look at him in a way, even though I know this probably is not his thought process, but it was like, so you don't care enough about your kid, even though that's not, it's just him and his feelings. So I'm learning active day in therapy to detach my experience and my feelings towards it, and kind of just seeing it for who this person is and what vibrations they vibrate on and how they're viewing it. Like it doesn't necessarily make the person bad because they don't view it the way that I do, regardless of I feel like this is moral, this should be natural or innate. Like my experience and my knowledge and what I grew up with, and his is his. So I totally, oh my gosh, it's reframing your thought process, really.
Yeah.
What about you?
For me, like, same difference. Well, same and different. My parents, I've always grown up in a two-parent household, right? My parents have been married for maybe 34, 35 years, right? And not at the time that Brandon came, but you get what I'm saying. They've been together forever. I've seen them go through good and bad, right? I've seen them make it and persevere and all of that. So my perception was that when I had a child with my person, it would be the same thing, like good or bad, we were going to see it through. And when that didn't come, it was also changing my perspective. Like, well, if that's not here, I can still have that same type of safe space for my kid that, even though we're not, if I can't collaborate with somebody else, you're going to see that collaboration somewhere, right? Whether it's with me and you or me and your grandmother or me and your grandfather, I had to change what I thought the perfect dynamic should be, which was difficult. But I think what's easier for the kid is if they never experienced anything different.
Yeah.
Then it's fine for them, right?
Yeah.
The caveat to that and what caused the level. There's been lots of levels of grief as your kid gets older, right? And I didn't. I thought the main thing would be with him being a baby and her not being around and it being difficult. And that was me, right? I didn't realize that as he got older, he would grieve. You know, Mother's Day would come around. And, you know, at the school, because the indoctrination is there's always two parents, right? Yeah. So Mother's Day will come around and everybody was making cards for Mom. And the school called me and was like, yo, you got to come because he done locked himself in the bathroom and he's had a breakdown. And I had been focusing so much on me that it had never really, it didn't even hit me that today was Mother's Day and maybe I should take off work and not have my kid at school. Thought never crossed my mind, right? And they calling me like, you need to come because he's having a breakdown. And so I go, and he's like, you know, why don't I have? And and everybody else has. And I felt terrible. Like that was probably the worst day of my life, right? Because my son was crying for something again that I could not provide. And I felt like dirt, right? Like terrible. And so now it's like, well, not only do I have to be a safeguard for my mental health, but now I got to make sure that you always straight, you know? So parenting is a lot, you know, it's a great, it's rewarding, but it in these type of situations and having these types of grief, it doesn't go away, you know, for anybody. You just have to learn how to be able to deal with it in a healthy way. Yeah. Right. But it's always going to be an absence. It's like death. You know, you may have your good days when a person that you know, were in love with or knew or whatever the case has passed away. You'll have your good days, but then there's certain days where it's like, dang, I really wish you was here, you know? And I for me in this situation, I'm not grieving a person. I'm more so grieving a position.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Shawana, I had a question for you before I go.
Okay.
I know you are always in this space of like, you want to change the narrative. You have to, you actively have to like rewrite what you grew up seeing or experiencing. So I have the same question for you that I have for Mike. What was it like when you figured out, as much as I have tried, what I'm trying to rewrite is not about to happen like how I want it to happen?
I think it was, I don't know when I call it the rose petal sunshades. I don't know if I put them off, but it was crushing at first because it was like, oh man, like some of this I'm not Superwoman. Like some of this I really can't. Like I'm not gonna be able to like will my way into this, pray my way into this, because first of all, it's not even on me. It's, you know, the other party's inability to show up in a healthy way. So they're like, I'm trying to change a narrative for two people and I'm only responsible for one. And my son, of course. So I think at first it almost felt like it was decapitating. Like if you feel helpless, but then you start, it almost forces you to look at what supports you do have and who does show up and how God, even without you having it the way you would visualize it, the way that God was like, what you rams in the bush, and God put these people in your lives intricately so that even though visually it looks like you're lacking, you really still have this love or this scenario. And when I started looking at it that way, I feel like it just gave me hope again that I can still experience like the feelings that I'm looking for without attaching it to a person. So I feel like for me, the moment for me was, and believe it or not that I haven't known this, but our last episode that we did talking about grieving people that are still alive, I listened to my clip when I posted it. It was on autoplay on Instagram and it played over and over and over in my head. And it was something about hearing me say that even if my mom gets sober, I'm not gonna have the relationship I wanted. It was like just poured into my brain. And I literally sat and like just held myself and just cried for like an hour. It was like I was coming to the realization of what my reality was. But once I was able to do that, I literally woke up the next day and felt so empowered. Like I know I'm not a victim anymore. Like I'm not I don't have to keep grieving what I don't have because I know I'm not gonna have it. Like it is, regardless if I understand why. Like it's like the box left, and it was like, this is my situation. There are going to be days where this is the fuck off. There's going to be days where I get sad about it, but I don't have to. This is not my story. I don't have to sit in this. And I have to recreate, something different in a realistic way. The fairy tale is gone now, or it's going to magically happen this way, or this is going to happen, and this person's going to come in and going to save the day, and all this stuff. It's like, no, now I can practically live a happy life. I feel like. Not perfect, because nobody's perfect, but I just feel like I'm practical about my approaches and my thought processes about things. So I think did I answer it?
Yes, you did. Yes. So I'll go. So my story's on the other side of y'all's. So my husband and I've known each other since we were 12. We were just friends though. I didn't like him. That was, it's my bro. And then, that changed over the course of time. So we got together at 19, got married at 23. My husband's name is Brandon. Brandon and I, we got married. I was in grad school. He had just gotten to the military. So babies were not on the menu yet. So finally, I graduate from grad school. We get into life. And then I'm like, why I ain't pregnant yet? Like, something is off. So go through different tests, getting different things done. And they tell me that I have PCOS, which is polycystic ovary syndrome. So basically, I have cysts on my ovaries, which affect my hormones, which affect my ability to ovulate, affects my ability to conceive and have kids. So I went through the process of feeling like I had done everything right, or we did everything right, because we dated, we got married, we waited until, we were in a good position, and then boom, American story. Now it's time for us to have kids. We had 2 dogs. So, I literally had everything set up the way it was supposed to be set up. And then it didn't happen. And then they kept not happening. So I was just kind of like, what the fuck is going on? But honestly, for me, it really, really didn't hit until we tried doing fertility treatments and they weren't working. Because then it comes a matter of, it's one thing for your body to not do certain things, like even outside of just fertility issues. Like, people take medication for all kinds of stuff because their body just, it just don't do what it's supposed to do sometimes. But then when I got to the point where science and medicine weren't working either, that was just a different kind of disappointment, because science is science. Like, this shit is supposed to be working and it's not. So for me, the disappointment and the devastation was just heavy, especially once we found out everything was solely on my end. So even with me going through tests and my husband going through tests, all his stuff was fine. So there was a lot of grieving the fact that, are we ever going to be able to have kids? Like, I can't give this man a family. What else did I think about myself? I have failed as a woman, because if we can't do shit else as a woman, we can have kids. We can have a slew of them. So for me, it was just all this like, I just felt like a failure. Like, I felt like, oh my God. And then the crazy thing about it was, I really had to rewire myself, because to me, I felt like I failed at life. Forget the fact that, by 23, I was married and I had a master's degree. Within 2 years after that, we had brought our first home. Then I think a year after that, I got another degree. So forget the fact that I have accomplished, all these things. Me and my husband have built this beautiful life together. None of that mattered. The fact that I could not, or we could not conceive a baby, that just towed me down, because I was just like, the one thing I should be able to do, I cannot do. So it took a lot of therapy to get me to a place of not accepting that I'm never gonna have kids, because I just don't have that state of mind. but just accepting that it's okay if it don't happen the way that I want it to happen. Like, I'm just at a place where if I gotta adopt some kids, I'm just gonna have to adopt some kids. If I got to spend my life savings and get a surrogate, that's just what I got to do. But I was just really stuck in oh my God, I did everything right. And then the one thing I thought was going to be easy was not easy. And then similar to what you were saying, Mike, infertility, like Gabrielle Union has, said some stuff. Eve has said some stuff. But that's not like Black women, like conversation, even though we actually suffer from it more than white women. But this whole notion of not being able to have kids, I felt like I was by myself because I'm just like, well, what, ma'am, what do you mean? I don't understand. Like, I need you to break down what this is and how this is going to look. So, nobody had ever had that conversation with me. So, you go to family life or whatever in school, and it's always, well, you can get pregnant. First time you have sex, you can get pregnant. So nobody had prepared me for the fact that, hey, I know we talk about all the time how easy it is to get STDs and to get pregnant. Nobody told me that I might come to a point in my life where I cannot conceive. So it was just like a shocker. It was just life-changing because I had not planned for that. What I had planned for was to get my degrees, to get married, and then we were going to have kids. It never crossed my mind that like I wasn't going to be able to conceive naturally or to have kids whenever I was ready to have them. So I just had to get to a place where like I look at me and my husband like as a family now. Like before I was like we're just like a married couple because we don't have no kids. So for me, I really had to rewrite the story of like us together is a family. The family we have that we bring together from either side, that is our family. Like I don't have to have children to say that I have a family. So yeah, that was a lot.
That was good though.
That was beautiful.
Oh, it was. I was like, dang, Britt. So
that touched me. I was wow.
No, for real, did. Because Brittany be vulnerable, but like she went there just then.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I had to prepare myself because I think that's why I ain't prepared for this episode. I was just like, whatever I say is what I'm going to say. Yeah.
Okay. So now that we have talked about our personal experiences, Mike, I did have a question for you.
Ooh.
Now, where you are now, seeing where you were when you became a single father, the situation with his mom, having to grieve those expectations, with this perspective you have now, what would you tell yourself then? Like, what do you wish you had have known then that you do now or that you know about now?
I think if I could go back and have that and have initial conversations with myself, I think the first thing I would have told myself is to breathe, right? I really would have told myself to go talk to somebody about how I was feeling. Because I felt completely alienated, like on the island to myself. Like there was nobody I could really talk to about me, right? So I would definitely tell myself this, to seek some mental health, help. I would have reassured myself that it was gonna be okay because nobody was really saying that either. Nobody was telling me it was. I think everybody was treating it like the world had fell in, right? And nobody was really coming to me like, hey, it's gonna be okay, right? It was more so just like, deal with it, right? Because I think if we being real, I felt like my parents took it harder than I did because at the point in time, they felt like my life was over. Right. So it was like everybody else was able to grieve about my situation, but me. Right. So I really would have went back to myself and saying, hey, it's going to be all right. You're still going to have a great life. You're still going to be able to raise this kid. You're still going to be able to experience things. But your expectations are going to have to be different because now you have to create something. Right. You can't sit here and long for what's not here. It's time to create something. And what you're going to create is going to be so much more beautiful than what you ever could have had. And I think if I could go back and say those words to myself, I think it would have really changed my perspective on a lot of things. Yeah.
I would tell myself that it has nothing to do with you. Like, it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with you. Like, I just wish, I feel like I'm about to get, I just wish somebody would have told me that, because I just learned to internalize so early everything, like literally everything, every person's reaction to me, every person's thought, and hold on to people's words. Like, it was just, I wish that I could have, or somebody could have said, don't take it personal. Like, it don't have nothing to do with you. And I feel like, not that it would have completely altered things, but I don't feel like stuff would have lasted as long as it did. Like, I feel like I'd have been able to walk away in a decent amount of time or sever things. But and I wholeheartedly believe that everything happens for a reason. Like, it took for me to get it at this time for whatever reason, and I'm happy about it. Like, I'm still experiencing joy. But if for somebody listening to this, or somebody who, who's young, or who might be about to come into a situation, like, we can give these gems to them. Like, it's not personal.
I would have told myself, you need to go talk to somebody, like, ASAP. 2, I think the way that the doctor who diagnosed me prolonged my processing. So I immediately went into, okay, I understand you saying I have this condition, but, like, how do I get pregnant? So I never really had a process of understanding that, like, so for people who don't know, PCOS affects your hormones. And if you are a female, your hormones affect a whole lot of different things, not just you getting pregnant. So it took me a while to actually understand what my body was experiencing. So I would tell myself, 1, to seek, mental health counseling, but 2, understand what your body is really going through. Because I'm a fixer. So in my mind, what is the solution to this? Or what can I do to make sure, like, I get pregnant? Like, I really didn't think about, okay, you have this condition. You don't know what else is going to end up being altered, with your body. So you need to learn about what this condition is, what it can do, what can you eat, supplements can you take to make it better. So I wish I would have processed it better rather than running to the solution. And I would tell myself not to be ashamed. I had a lot of self-shame for such a long time, and it came from nobody but me. Like, nobody said nothing wild to me. My husband never said nothing wild to me. So literally all the negative thoughts that I had were coming from myself. Like, it was nothing nobody said, and I was, like, internalizing it, or it was sticking to me. It was just everything from my mind. So I would just tell myself to not be ashamed and to go easier on myself, because, you can't help where you are. This is just life happening. So that's what I would tell myself.
That's beautiful.
So this has been really good. It just flowed all the way through. I'm like,
very therapeutic, because
bullet. So I guess lastly, I would just ask, we kind of just did it though, because we normally would just end with, what advice would you give to others? But I would just give them the same advice that I would have gave myself, honestly.
Yeah, same thing.
Did you have anything that you just wanted to, like, express about your experience that you feel like people should know that we haven't already touched on?
Just the same thing, man. Just, I feel like single fathers that are there, right? It's an entire community. It's an entire community of us, right? And I just feel like as the world progresses and as things progress, and as we get into different forms of what family is and blended families and things of that nature, right? Just to make sure that we check on our single fathers as much as we check on everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. Because if the expectation is going to be there for us to be the head, to be the father, to be the leader, to be the provider, to be everything else, you have to have some type of outlet to be able to put that stuff at the end of the day. Yeah. So that would be my only thing.
Support for the community.
Mine would be similar. Like, I know women who struggle with fertility stuff probably feel like nobody gets it and they are by themselves. But one of the beauties about social media is there are literally millions of us up there that struggle with fertility, PCOS, endometriosis, all that kind of stuff. So even if it's something as small as, finding a community online or somewhere, like, you're just not alone. So I would say just research like support groups, anything, because I feel like was the hardest thing for me was feeling like nobody understood where I was and nobody got it, because I didn't know anybody else who had PCOS or had fertility issues, because nobody talks about that kind of stuff. So I would say definitely find support. So similar message, just look for your people because they out there.
So with that being said, Mike, we just want to thank you for coming up here and being so transparent and open. I know that this episode is really going to like bless a lot of people, especially Black men, single fathers. Can you plug yourself? Can you let us know where you can be found, what activities you may have going on? Let the world know what the single-handedly world's greatest single father has going on.
So as she said, I am still the world's reigning and defender, greatest single father. So I host a podcast called The Safe Spot. So that's DASAFE, like a safe spot. And it's just a podcast where we're able to, as Black people, as Black men, just be able to come and express our emotions, our opinions, our views on anything and everything and feel safe. So if anybody wants to check that in, I'm everywhere. I'm on Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, wherever you want to, have your podcast stream from. Please check me out at any time.
All right. Brittany, do you have anything?
I don't. Mike, thank you for coming on. Tell your story a trillion times. I think you still should write a book. I feel like your experience, it may not be unique to the world, but it is very much so unique. Like, just the way that everything has happened, it's very unique. So yeah, I think you should just tell your story everywhere and anywhere for anybody, because it needs to be heard. So thank you for coming on and sharing that.
Thank you all for having me. This has been amazing.
Yes.
Follow us on everything, Brown Skin Blueprint.
Yes.
Stay tuned, guys. This grief series has been like everything. It really has. Every time time for the recorded episode come up, I swear I'm like actively experiencing it like day before, day of stuff. So this was great. And as always, guys, follow us on YouTube, subscribe, and just stay tuned in. We thank you for rocking with us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Yes.